What would you do if a millionaire mocked your skin, your car, and your life, then challenged you in front of a crowd, not knowing you were once the fastest man on earth? Darius King, a black driver, stepped into the Whitlock Motors dealership, holding old keys to a faded silver car that most people ignored, but carried his entire story inside it. Arthur Whitlock, a white millionaire, spotted Darius from across the showroom and smirked loudly, telling his staff that people like him should not even be walking near luxury cars. Darius looked around politely, but Arthur's voice grew sharper, filled with hidden racism, as he mocked the silver car, saying it looked like scrap metal and that no ordinary street driver could ever understand real speed. Customers stared, whispers filling the air like smoke, as Darius tried to remain calm, keeping his deep breath steady, even though anger twisted inside him, because he had faced comments like this many times, and he knew silence sometimes hurt more than insults. Arthur stepped closer, his expensive shoes tapping loudly on the tile floor, challenging Darius to race outside on the open road, saying that if Darius somehow won, he would give him a full-year contract with Whitlock Motors, but if he lost, he would have to publicly admit he was out of his league. Staff members laughed softly, believing Arthur could never lose, especially not to a black man with an old car, and the humiliation in their eyes burned more than their words. Darius lifted his chin quietly, his voice calm but strong, telling Arthur that a man should never judge another by his skin or his car, because skill lived inside the driver, not inside the paint. Arthur scoffed loudly, calling Darius brave but foolish, saying a junk car and a black driver stood no chance against a Whitlock engine. Darius felt his jaw tighten, but he refused to let anger control him. Instead, he held the keys firmly, remembering the years he spent behind the wheel, the nights of practice, the trophies he never bragged about, and the world records he once shattered as an F1 champion before leaving the spotlight after a near-fatal crash. The dealership grew silent as Darius finally accepted the challenge with a calm nod, and Arthur laughed confidently, thinking the victory was already his, not knowing he was standing face to face with a legend hidden beneath scars, strength, and silence. Customers pulled out their phones, ready to witness the race, believing Arthur was offering entertainment, but they were about to witness justice, speed, and truth collide harder than any engine could. And if you want to watch how Darius King turns humiliation into power and how truth outruns arrogance, make sure you subscribe and comment race to support his courage. Darius King stepped out of the dealership with the crowd following behind him, their voices buzzing with excitement, because they believed Arthur Whitlock could never lose to a man driving a faded silver car. Darius walked with calm, even though Arthur mocking his skin, and his car still echoed loudly in his mind. Arthur Whitlock strutted confidently behind him, the millionaire tapping his keys against his palm, as if victory already belonged to him, and he smirked at his staff, who whispered racist jokes under their breath, thinking Darius was nothing more than entertainment. The late afternoon sunlight hit the open road behind the dealership, making the faded silver car shine faintly like a quiet warrior that had survived storms no one else could see, and Darius touched its hood, gently remembering the years it carried him through victories, pain, and recovery after his near-fatal crash. Arthur's luxury sports car roared loudly as he started the engine, the sound bold and arrogant, just like its owner, who looked at Darius and said he hoped Darius would not cry when he lost, because men like him always folded under pressure. Laughter rose from the crowd, and the sting of those words cut deep into Darius' chest, but he breathed slowly, reminding himself that anger wasted energy and skill won races, not pride. Arthur leaned out his window, calling Darius a nobody driver with a nobody car, and a few people nodded, as if agreeing, because to them speed belonged only to expensive engines and wealthy hands, not to a black man who walked in with quiet confidence. Darius entered his silver car, gripping the worn steering wheel, the same wheel he had once held while breaking records, and the memories of roaring circuits, flashing lights, and global crowds filled his mind like fuel, waking up the champion he had kept hidden for years. The crowd stepped back, forming a long, narrow path on the open road, while phones lifted into the air, ready to record the moment they believed Darius would lose everything, including his dignity. Arthur revved his engine loudly, shouting that he would teach Darius his place, and that this race would prove money and skin determined skill, and the racist edge in his voice made some spectators shift uncomfortably, but none of them spoke up because silence felt safer. Darius lowered his head for a moment, saying quietly to himself that a race was not won by noise, but by focus, and he could almost hear the sound of F1 circuits in his memory, pushing him forward with purpose. As the engines warmed, tension spread through the air like electricity, and Arthur shouted for someone to give the countdown, believing he was seconds away from embarrassing Darius publicly. Darius tightened his grip, sensing the quiet strength in his hands, returning after years of hiding, and he whispered to his car that it was time to remind the world who he once was and who he still could be. When the countdown began, Arthur kept looking at Darius with a mocking smirk, but Darius' eyes stayed forward, sharp, determined, ready to let his truth speak louder than every insult thrown at him. The moment the final number was called, the engines exploded forward, and the race that would change everything began with a roar that shook the air. And if you want to see how Darius King shocks the world and makes Arthur Whitlock face the truth, make sure you subscribe and comment speed to support his journey. Darius King felt the world blur around him as the race launched forward with a violent roar. The faded silver car surging ahead with a power that shocked the crowd who had expected it to crawl behind Arthur Whitlock's luxury engine. And Darius kept his sharp brown eyes locked on the road, while the afternoon light reflected off his calm jawline and short twists, as though crowning him with quiet confidence. Arthur Whitlock pressed his foot harder on the pedal with disbelief, because despite his expensive engine and arrogant certainty, he could not understand how a black man in an old car was holding pace with him. And the panic in his icy blue eyes grew each second as he shouted insults through the open window, calling the moment luck, and calling Darius a street driver pretending to be a champion. The crowd along the road watched in shock, their phones trembling, as the silver car that they had mocked moments earlier moved like a bullet, slicing the air with the elegance of a machine built from discipline and the heart of a man who had survived more than any of them knew. And every second reminded Darius of the circuits he once ruled, the trophies he once lifted, and the world records he once shattered before his near-fatal crash forced him to walk away from fame. Arthur tried to push his engine harder, screaming in frustration, because he could not allow a black driver to outrun him, not in front of his staff, not in front of customers, and not in front of a world that already doubted his control over his own empire. And his hateful words cut through the air like broken glass, exposing the racism he kept hidden behind smiles and suits. Darius ignored the insults, keeping his breath steady and his grip firm on the worn steering wheel, letting instinct and experience guide him as the fading road ahead opened like a battlefield where truth would soon reveal itself. Arthur swerved dangerously, trying to block Darius' path and almost forcing him toward the roadside gravel, but Darius reacted with the flawless precision of someone who had once danced with death at 300 kilometers per hour, and the crowd gasped as he maneuvered with a grace Arthur could never buy with money. The silver car shot forward, its engine singing with purpose, as though waking from years of silence, and Arthur's mouth fell open, because the distance between them was growing like a wound he could not close. Darius did not smile, he did not celebrate, he simply focused, letting his past power flow through him like fire, because this race was not about pride or ego, but about dignity, respect, and the truth that no insult, no millionaire, and no prejudice would ever break him. As the finish line approached, the dealership crowd erupted louder than ever, realizing they were witnessing a legend reveal himself in front of their eyes. And Arthur slammed his fist on the wheel, screaming that this could not be happening, because money was supposed to win, power was supposed to win, and he had built his life believing men like Darius never could. Darius crossed the finish line with breathtaking speed, and the entire road went silent before erupting into disbelief, because the man they mocked, the driver they underestimated, and the black champion they dismissed had just outrun arrogance with truth. And if you want to see what happens when Arthur Whitlock is forced to face the world after losing to the man he tried to humiliate, make sure you subscribe and comment champion to support Darius King as his journey rises higher than ever. Darius King brought his faded silver car to a calm, steady stop as the crowd erupted in disbelief, their cheers rising like thunder, while Arthur Whitlock stumbled out of his luxury sports car, his face pale, furious, and trembling, because the reality that he had been beaten by a black driver in an old engine cracked his arrogance like glass and left him exposed in front of the world. Arthur's icy blue eyes darted around searching for excuses, blaming the road, blaming the sun, blaming anything except his own pride, while his staff, who had mocked Darius earlier now, stared at him silently, no longer laughing, because the defeat they believed impossible had unfolded right before their eyes, leaving them ashamed. Darius stepped out of his car, his shoulders rising with slow, steady breaths, as he walked toward Arthur with the dignity of a man who had won battles much harder than a race, and the sunlight glowed against his calm jawline, making him look like a champion who had just returned to his throne. Arthur shouted that the race was unfair, that Darius cheated, that someone like him could never win honestly, and his voice cracked with the same racist anger he had tried to mask for years. But the crowd stared at him with disgust because his excuses sounded smaller than his loss. Darius stopped in front of him, his sharp brown eyes steady as stone, telling Arthur that skill lived in discipline, not in money, and that no amount of wealth could cover the weakness of a hateful heart, because true strength was earned, not bought. Arthur tried to speak, but the words refused to leave his throat, and in that silence, the world finally saw the truth that the millionaire who mocked everyone had been humbled by the man he tried to humiliate. A few customers approached Darius asking how he learned to drive like that, and whispers rippled through the crowd as someone revealed that he was once an F1 champion, a legend who had left the world stage after a near-fatal crash. And suddenly, people realized the man they dismissed was a hero they never bothered to recognize. Arthur's knees weakened as he remembered the contract he had offered Darius, thinking he would win easily, and Darius reminded him quietly that a man must honor his word even when it hurts, because integrity matters more than ego. Arthur signed the contract with shaking hands, his signature a symbol of defeat and reality, as the crowd recorded the moment that the millionaire who mocked Darius was forced to give him the victory he earned. Darius placed the paper gently in his pocket, telling Arthur that racism was the slowest engine any man could carry because it dragged him backward while the world moved forward with truth, justice, and courage. The crowd clapped louder than ever, cheering Darius' name, while some of Arthur's staff apologized with lowered heads because they finally understood that judging a man by skin or by the age of his car was the biggest mistake they had ever made. Darius looked at the camera, the wind brushing gently across his short twists, and he told everyone watching to stand for justice, to rise above hate, and to let humility drive their lives, because arrogance always crashes while truth always wins. And if you believe Darius King proved that dignity is stronger than wealth and courage is faster than pride, make sure you subscribe and comment Rise to keep supporting stories that show the world the power of respect, truth, and humanity.